The following is a CryptoCurrencyWire audio production. CryptoCurrencyWire is one of 50-plus trusted brands from the Investor Brand Network, IBN. As a multifaceted financial news and publishing company, Investor Brand Network uses its network of more than 5,000 key distribution outlets, as well as other corporate communication tools, to introduce public and private companies to a wide audience of investors, consumers, journalists, and the general public. Our reputation for highly efficient communication strategies is based on the experience and relationships our team has in the space. It is Investor Brand Network's unwavering commitment to connect the investment community with companies that have great potential and a strong dedication to building shareholder value. The following interview may feature a client partner of Investor Brand Network. Investor Brand Network may have been compensated for the production of this interview. Please be sure to read our entire disclaimer for full disclosure.
Hi, and welcome to another exciting show here with me, Carmel Fisher. Today we're spotlighting Forward Industries, Inc. Very excited to sit down with Kyle Samani. He is the chairman of the said Forward Industries, and they are listed on NASDAQ as FORD. Kyle, welcome. Very excited to hear more from you today.
Carmel, thanks so much for having me on the show. Pleasure to be here.
Excellent. As a start, tell us more about Forward Industries, Inc., what your main mission and vision is.
Yeah, so I came in as chairman of Forward Industries a few weeks ago as part of a $1.65 billion PIPE transaction in the company. That PIPE transaction was the largest PIPE for any Solana-based digital asset treasury company. And as part of that now, the company has added a new strategy to its business, which is to focus on driving SOL per share for shareholders in the company. So today, the company is sitting on 6.8 million SOL tokens and change. That's worth, I think, something like 1.5 billion today, plus or minus, something like that. And we are now deploying a bunch of strategies to increase our SOL per share over time for our shareholders.
Wonderful segue into the next question, which I'm really curious, and I'm sure our listeners too, is how do you intend to generate yield? Like, what specific mechanisms would you be using beyond base staking rewards?
Yeah, so there's a handful of things we're doing to that effect. One is actually we announced, I believe, last week, a partnership with a group called 00. 00 is kind of this new, basically fast lane for sending traffic around the internet. And using 00, we can actually earn higher yield for our shareholders via our core staking operation. So that's the first. The second is we can actually deploy our balance sheet, both SOL denominated and USD denominated, into DeFi on Solana to actually earn incremental yield. So for example, we can take liquid staked SOL, and then there's a bunch of various DeFi protocols out there, Drift, Gauntlet, a bunch of others, and we can actually deploy those assets into those protocols, and those assets can be used for trading and lending and other purposes to generate incremental yield above and beyond the base staking rate. The dollar denominated side is arguably even more interesting. Today, Forward Industries can borrow US dollars roughly in the range of 7.5% to 8%, something like that on an annualized basis. We're hoping to lower that cost of capital over time, and we can deploy those dollars on chain into DeFi to earn yields in the range of 12 to 20%. And so there is a cost of capital arbitrage that we can execute there to accrete even more value for our shareholders. We have a bunch of other ideas we're bouncing around on that are not live yet, but we're excited to announce those as they become ready.
Excited to hear more as the time gets closer. But how are you thinking about the risk return profile of the DeFi strategies versus, say, more conservative approaches?
Yeah, we're really fortunate here to rely on the expertise of all three sponsor groups, meaning Multicoin, Jump, and Galaxy, who are the three sponsors of this vehicle. All three firms have obviously been heavily involved in Solana and in Solana DeFi over the years. And so we all have a pretty strong familiarity and understanding of the various protocols and contracts out there. We do have a formal risk assessment methodology that we've adopted for Forward Industries before we deploy investor capital into any of these various contracts and protocols. And that the methodology that Forward has adopted actually is a culmination of the experience of Multicoin, Jump, and Galaxy. So you're really getting the best of all three worlds in that underwriting process.
Sounds good. So what's your target SOL per share growth rate? And if you can speak to that, and how would you balance the yield generation against the volatility that's pretty inherent in these protocols?
Yeah, we haven't specified a specific target of SOL per share accretion, but look, the base staking rate is, call it 6.5%, 7%, something like that. We certainly aim to outperform that, and I'm pretty confident we'll be able to do so. In terms of managing vol, we don't think it's in the mandate of this vehicle to be playing hedge fund on the SOL USD price. If you want to express a view on SOL USD, you can do so either via Ford stock or via the Solana directly. But we think Ford should actually just be aiming to be maximally long and to just be aiming to earn incremental yield and tokens on top of that rather than trading around the SOL USD price specifically.
So you mentioned earlier that Forward raised $1.65 billion in the pipe, and it now looks like a strategic entry point around $232 per SOL. Now, with SOL trading at different levels today and your plans to use ATM offerings and preferred equity, how will you be thinking about the accretion or dilution calculus when deploying additional capital?
Yeah. So again, we view our North Star as increasing SOL per share for our shareholders. And so if we're trading at a premium to MNAV, which we are today, I think we're at 1.6 or 1.7x, something like that. We can sell common equity and then use the proceeds to buy SOL. The board did authorize an ATM program a few weeks ago. So we can execute on that where permitted. And then on the flip side, certainly if we're below 1x, we would not be doing an ATM at that time. That would be dilutive to our shareholders rather than accretive.
Could you mention what that price would look like where it becomes dilutive to the existing shareholders?
I haven't done it off the top of my head, but you can, look at whatever the current MNAV is and divide by the stock price, and that would get you into that range.
Perfect. Okay, so Forward is essentially pioneering a new category, a publicly traded company operating as a blockchain treasury vehicle with active DeFi participation. I am understanding this correctly, right?
That is correct, Carmel.
Wonderful. So how are you navigating the regulatory landscape, particularly around securities classification, not declassification, for staked and DeFi deployed assets?
Yeah, this is an area we're super excited about, and actually I think it's one of the things that actually caused us to decide to do this deal and launch Forward as a Solana treasury company. On July 31st, SEC Chairman Paul Atkins gave a speech. It's titled Project Crypto. You can Google it. It's a 5-minute read. I encourage you to read it. But in that speech, he basically told the 4,500 employees who work at the SEC, and he told all of them unequivocally that we are going to move U.S. securities markets on chain. And when he gave that speech, that was really our impetus to want to go ahead and do this transaction, because we now view it as part of our mandate. In addition to our financial mandate of increasing SOL per share for shareholders, we now look at it as our broader kind of ethos mandate to help accelerate this vision of Project Crypto. And we believe we can do so via Forward Industries. To that end, we've already announced a partnership with a company called Superstate, which we're working with to tokenize our shares. Those shares will be available pretty soon on the Solana blockchain, so that anyone anywhere in the world will be able to buy and hold Forward shares using any Solana wallet. Phantom, Solflare, any of the other majors will all support it. So we look at that as important for accelerating the mission of Project Crypto. Beyond that, once our shares are tokenized, we then want to also kind of be able to pioneer other operations on chain as well. So for example, we want to be able to actually fundraise natively on chain. No one's ever done that before. We would love to be able to issue a SOL denominated dividend on chain. No one's ever done that before. We would love to be able to do buybacks on chain, shareholder governance on chain. There's all of these different kinds of things that are intuitive to, in theory, but that there is some kind of regulatory nuance to doing it natively on chain. And we very much intend to basically raise our hands and be the first people to do those things, because we think that's important for the long-term growth and evolution of Solana and of this broader vision for internet capital markets.
Novel indeed. But what conversations are you currently having with regulators? And then how does Forward's model differ legally and structurally from companies like, say, MicroStrategy or the Bitcoin Treasury Playbook?
Yeah, so I can't comment on any specific conversations we're having with regulators at this time. To the best of my knowledge, none of the Bitcoin treasury companies have indicated they're trying to do anything like this. That may change in the future, but the just given the nature of Bitcoin as an asset, it's less intuitive for companies like the strategy to tokenize on chain. Now they may, and I hope they do, but it's probably like less ethos aligned for them. In terms of uh, our regulatory strategy generally, we very much intend to be as upfront and as forward as possible with regulators. I have actually been actively engaged in DC over the course of this year. I was actually at the White House when President Trump signed the Genius Act a few months ago. We had a number of very public meetings with the SEC around staking ETFs and a number of other things. So we have been engaged with both Congress as well as the executive branch and even the White House directly on a lot of these issues and are doing what we can to push the industry forward and to get the ideal policy outcomes for industry.
Definitely a novel. I'll say it again because you are creating a bridge between traditional equity markets and on-chain capital markets, which is pretty awesome. Can you explain the strategic rationale behind acquiring an equity stake in Superstate? What specific use cases are you envisioning for tokenized Ford shares?
Yeah, so as part of our partnership with Superstate, we're obviously working with them as the basically a service provider. And Superstate really wants to have a customer that is going to try all of the new wacky things natively on chain. And we want to kind of be that customer. And so we were able to secure as part of our contract with them an ability to earn, to get a meaningful amount of equity in their business without consideration, meaning we're not taking dollars off the balance sheet to invest in Superstate. We'll get that equity basically for just being this kind of guinea pig customer. And these are the kinds of deals we want to strike on behalf of our shareholders so that we can drive incremental value for them. We haven't announced any other deals of similar structure, but I can tell you we're working on a number of them and are excited to be able to talk about them fairly soon because we think there's a lot of ways we can accrete value for shareholders via these kinds of deals. Once our shares are tokenized with Superstate, we then want to be able to do things like fundraising on chain, dividends on chain, shareholder governance on chain, and these other mechanisms.
So how can you explain how does enabling Ford as DeFi collateral create a flywheel effect for both liquidity and shareholder value? And are there any technical or regulatory hurdles to full 24/7 tradability that you can discuss at this point?
Yeah, I mean, it can be done today. And look, the biggest thing is you need obviously market makers who are ready to quote on chain. We're working on kind of figuring that out now. And then in terms of use of these assets as collateral, I mean, it's I think generally been shown across all assets that having an asset being eligible as collateral is typically good for liquidity and good for asset prices. And so, we in our partnership announcement with Superstate, we announced contemporaneously that we're working with some of the major borrow lend protocols on Solana, such as Drift, Camino, and Margin and Jupiter, I believe, to enable Ford shares to be used as collateral in those respective systems. So we're doing everything we can to make this asset as useful as possible for shareholders.
As the co-founder now of Multicoin and an early Solana backer, you've clearly made a concentrated bet on the specific ecosystem over Ethereum, Bitcoin, or other L1s. What gives you the conviction that Solana will be the infrastructure layer for global capital markets?
Yeah, Carmel, I'm really glad you asked that question. So I got into crypto in 2016, and my first true love in crypto was Ethereum. It was at one point, 90% of my net worth. And over the kind of from 2016 through early 2018, I grew increasingly disenfranchised with Ethereum because I did not think they were shipping fast enough and improving the kind of core throughput of the system at a rate that I thought was going to be necessary for Ethereum to fulfill this vision of internet capital markets. And so in early 2018, we began to really actively seek alternatives to Ethereum. And that process led us to ultimately, finding Solana. Multicoin Capital actually led all 3 rounds of financing in Solana before the network launched. So we led the seed round as well as the Series A over the course of 2018 and 2019, and then they actually launched the network and the token in 2020. So we've had these kind of long held beliefs about Ethereum now for at this point, coming on 8 years or so. And I think most of our assessments have basically borne out correct. We've been very active investors in the Solana ecosystem. I think we've invested in roughly 30 or so teams and companies building on top of Solana over the last 5 years. And we are one of the most active investors in this ecosystem. When we look at Ethereum and Solana today, what we can see is, Solana is this scalable system. Just this past weekend, obviously there was a ton of volatility in the market, and Solana mainnet was processing in the range of 6,000 to 10,000 transactions per second through the volatility, and the chain really operated without any hiccups whatsoever. I believe there were even a few spikes to north of 100,000 transactions per second for a handful of windows, and the chain handled it gracefully. Conversely, if you look at Ethereum this past weekend, I believe I saw screenshots on Twitter of people paying gas fees of $1,500 to get a transaction included. Ethereum just celebrated its 10th birthday a couple of months ago. And so, I think that this kind of tells you everything you need to know. The Ethereum people have had 10 years, and they still haven't built a system that can scale. Solana's 5 years old, and this past weekend, is pushing north of 100,000 transactions per second. And so we think at this point now that the evidence is in plain sight for everyone to understand, which of these is really the fastest horse.
Well put. So Forward is, I believe, the largest publicly traded Solana treasury, right?
That is correct.
Amazing. How does this create a defensible competitive position?
Yeah, I think with these treasury companies, I think it's unlikely that investors are going to want to try and differentiate between 12 or 15 different Solana treasury companies. I think there's opportunities for some differentiation between them. I don't see how their market's going to bother to want to differentiate between 12 or 15 of these things. And so I do expect the market will actually prefer consolidation around one or maybe two of these things. And so I think kind of the keys to being that consolidating entity are having the balance sheet, having the resources, having the team to kind of be in the pole position, execute on that. And certainly we are striving to be in that position.
Awesome. Now, just to play devil's advocate for a second, if you are wrong about Solana's dominance, what's the downside case for Forward shareholders? And how diversified or undiversified do you intend to keep the treasury?
Yeah, I mean, again, as of today, our mandate is to be longs, or I should say to increase sold per share. That is not etched in stone, meaning we're not committed to that being the North Star 30 years from now. So it is the North Star today. If the board decides it makes sense to change that kind of North Star, then the board will come to that decision, and we'll obviously have public filings if or when we come to that decision. But as of now, that's not something that's currently being discussed, and that seems unlikely in the foreseeable future.
Wonderful. I have had a great conversation. I've learned so much. Thank you, Kyle Samani, the chairman of Forward Industries, Inc. They are listed once again on NASDAQ as FORD. I'm Carmel Fisher. You guys stay tuned for more.
Carmel, thanks so much for having me on the show. Pleasure to be here.
This audio interview is an original broadcast provided by CryptoCurrencyWire. CryptoCurrencyWire, CCW, is a CryptoWire news and content distribution syndicate that provides access to a syndicate of wire services via InvestorWire to reach all target markets, industries, and demographics in the most effective manner possible. CryptoCurrencyWire is another brand under the Investor Brand Network. Investor Brand Network may receive payments for corporate communication relations, as well as various press releases and social media solutions provided to its clients. You should assume that officers and directors of Investor Brand Network or financial analysts mentioned hold a position in and may intend to trade the securities for their own accounts. This interview is not an offer or recommendation to buy or sell securities. Information in this broadcast is presented solely for informative purposes and is not intended to be, or should it be construed as investment advice. As in all investments, investment in the featured company carries an investment risk. Listeners should review the company thoroughly with a registered investment advisor or registered stockbroker. This audio interview by Investor Brand Network is not purport to be a complete study of the featured company or other companies mentioned. Information used and statements of fact have been obtained from featured company and other sources, but not verified nor guaranteed by Investor Brand Network as to completeness and accuracy. Such information is subject to change without notice. Please see our full disclaimers and disclosures at investorbrandnetwork.com.